Hey everyone, I'm Daniel from Land Software, and in this video we will continue the project of constructing a site, a parking lot, based on the existing terrain. In the first video we have started our project from a simple sketch to designing the site, and at least calculating rough estimations on where to place the new constructed surface. And in this video we will continue constructing the site using Land4 tools. We already have our predefined geometry of the parking surface and the parking edge. And I have drawn this using just some polygons and following the measurements in the sketch. So I can now continue the project by drawing and designing the pavement. I can hide already the test surface and just keep the polyline, the initial polyline out of it as a reference, as a rough reference while drawing the pavement line. I will select the pavement category where I want to place my new objects in. And I can start by designing uh, maybe an alley here. So I would like my pavement to have maybe a 1 meter width alley and then continue along the parking lot. So I can maybe add, should be 5 meters long and 1 meter width. And do the same in the other side. I'm just using these rectangles as a help line to my to create the lines. And again, they're roughly, I will match them later to, or I'll adjust them later to match the road lines and the parking edge lines. Now having this, I can start designing the pavement around, and I'll use the spline for that just because it's more organic during the process of drawing it. So once I'm done designing the spline around the parking lot, I can use the polyline tool to create a polyline over it. And I can now delete the initial spline. So I have the polyline around. You can also work with a polyline or with a spline and use it further on to create it as a break line. But I just prefer in this situation the polyline, so I can unify it with the rest of with the other two lines, creating the alley. And I can also hide this polygon here. I'll place it in the test surface so it's hidden. Now I can make sure my lines are matching the road line. And this would be my outer boundary for the pavement. The pavement polyline, it's originally placed in the layer 2D drafting here, while my pavement category is placed in the pavement. And that is because once it becomes a 3D object, it's then handled by Land4, but I can also place it manually right now in the pavement as also as a 2D object, just as a polyline. Now having the overview of my pavement, I can start constructing the parking. And of course, this is not necessarily the right order, but I just wanted to have my pavement overview before. So the first thing to start with would be to construct the parking surface. We have the parking edge represented by these two lines, and then the parking surface, which um, for which I will use some interpolations to build it. But before that, just so it's easier to follow the construction of the site, I will remove the level lines of the existing terrain, and I'll just do that in 2D while I will keep it in the 3D. And another thing, I will go in the MVO and I will add brackets for the spot levels in the landfall existing. So the existing spot levels. Now it will be easier to follow the workflow and to distinguish the spot levels also by having this setting on. So now I'm ready to start constructing the parking surface. I'll start by set the right category, and I will use the gravity tool to place some spot levels at the junction between the parking surface and the existing road. Therefore, um, basically the gravity tool reads height values along the surface. So as you can see in the box, when I move my mouse around, the values are changing, and that's because they are read from the surface. So I will just place two spot levels here. As you can see, they are the same height for now, but if we go to the decimals, they have a bit of a difference, and we can also actually place a fall line in here to see the fall in between, but we can adjust this later if we want to. Having these two spot levels, we can now start by interpolating other spot levels. So I will use gradient interpolation with a 2% raise towards this corner, and now I have a new point here from which I can start interpolating other spot levels. So because I have my test surface before and I saw how the terrain is falling from this corner towards this corner here, I will use a gradient interpolation or a constant gradient interpolation where I'll use a 3% raise, which is the max I establish to work with in this surface. Therefore, I'll go and place the direction with a rubber band first time, the first click. And once I've done that, I can now place new spot levels. And now I can just continue the work and place spot levels in each corner of the parking surface. You can hit escape when you're done. And now we have already our parking surface defined by the spot levels. So I can already create a new surface. As you can see, they are highlighted, and because of the polygon, they will be also, their geometry will be defined. Once I press the green mark, I have my surface here. Back into the settings, I can place maybe a smaller height distance in between, so I can see the fall on my level lines. I can again do a quick volumetrics maybe in between, just to see where I am with the balance, and it looks very good. So I can delete it, and as you can see, checking out these volumes, it's a very fast process. Now I have my parking surface defined, and I'm happy with with the spot levels, I can continue and create the ridgeline defining the parking surface. So I will just need to select it and press on the create ridgeline function and start adding each of the spot levels to the line. Once I'm done, I can press the green mark, and now we have our ridgeline. In the 3D view, we can check the result. And here it is. So we can see that the ridgeline follows the junction with the road, and then I can control my surface using the spot levels in the corners. But because I have deleted the surface to create the ridgeline again, I will create it again, and I'll set in the land surface default settings, where I can define the settings for the coming land surfaces I'm working with. So I'll set 100 millimeters height distance in between the lines, and every time from now, these settings will apply to the next surfaces you're working with. We can also set the surface material at this stage for the parking surface. So I will place some asphalt, and I can also add the thickness, and I can set the land surface thickness to 30 centimeters, for instance. And now our surface is ready. We can now continue the work with the parking edge. So the parking edge, I would like to have a height distance in between the parking edge and the parking surface of 10 centimeters following the parking surface, except here where it meets the road. So here I'll use once again the gravity tool to simply place a spot level at the which I will basically copy from the terrain or from the existing road here. I'll make sure I'm in the right category for the parking edge, and because already there will be a lot of spot levels close to each other, the spot level text could be overlapping. So for this, I can use a tool which is called place a spot level with or without separate input. So I want to have my separate input when I place my spot levels, so I can decide where the spot level text can be placed. Now I have again the gravity tool on, and I can place a spot level here. And as you can see, my spot level has been placed, but now I have the hammer symbol where I can decide where to place my the text for the spot level. So I'll just place it here, and I will do the same on the other side. In this way, it's easy to avoid confusion, and this usually is in situations where you will have a lot of spot levels neighboring each other. Because my parking edge is defined by these two lines, I have to make sure I have them placed in the right location for both. So now I'm done defining the spot levels for the parking edge at the intersection with the road. And I will have to continue and place them along the parking. You can always check which text is linked to which spot level by simply selecting it, and then the text will be also highlighted accordingly. And you can always still have the chance to move it by dragging the purple button here, and therefore you can always adjust the spot level text, and you can place it whenever or wherever you want to. Now, having defined these spot levels, I can continue placing more spot levels along the parking edge. Therefore, I can start and place these spot levels manually. So I can have a 10 centimeters indifference in relation with the spot level at the corner of each or at each corner of the parking surface. So I can place this one manually. And again, I can set where to place my text. And I can do the same for each spot level. Hit escape when you're done. Now I have all the spot levels for the inside border of the parking edge, and I can continue placing spot levels for the outer boundary. And in this situation, I would like my top plan of the parking edge to have a little bit of a fall following the spot level from the interior side. So I will basically interpolate a spot level for each corner, and I can do that by simply using the gradient interpolation. Here I can have, because I want to have a fall from the outside border towards the inside of the parking lot, then I will use again a raise instead of a fall. Therefore, I will use a negative, and I will use 2%. Now I can place my spot level here, and again my text underneath. We can see there is a difference of roughly 1 centimeters in between. And now I can just continue the operation and do the same for each corner. We have already defined the spot levels in this area where the parking edge meets the terrain. So we have defined the spot levels for both sides, and we don't need to do anything here. Having the spot levels placed, we can continue by creating the ridge lines. So I will just select the polygon, the polyline, and use the create ridgeline function. Press the green mark when I'm done, and I can do the same for the inside of the parking edge. As you can see, it's quite easy to follow the spot levels because we also have the nod there of the line, and it's highlighted, so it's an easy process. Once again, press the green mark when I'm done. And now we can take a look in the 3D view and see how our parking edge looks like. So we can see also the spot levels we have defined, and we can also see the ridge lines, that they are parallel and following the edge. Now we will have to create the surface of the parking edge and work with the thickness. Once again, we can see why we have established a buffer in between the ridge line representing the parking surface and the inside of the parking edge. We will use later these lines to construct the parking edge surface. Now that I'm done placing the spot levels and creating the ridge lines, I will only need to copy the ridge line from the parking surface into the parking edge category. So I just need to select it and press on the copy to category button. And here we have the menu and we're going to copy it to parking edge. 9 Land4 objects have been copied to the parking edge, and that is the ridge line altogether with the spot levels. I made this operation just because it's easier to have control over it. Of course, you can use also the ridge line from the parking surface category and add it to the surface. So now I'm in the parking edge category and I press on the create land surface, and I will just start by defining the parameter I want to include in my new surface. And that is, of course, the outer boundary of the parking edge. Once I close the polygon, the selection of the objects will be highlighted, so I can see which ones will be included in creating the land surface. Now I'm ready to press on the green mark and my surface is created. When I select the fill, I can see also on the fill that all ridge lines are included here. By pressing tab, I can switch between the fills and we can see that this would be the parking surface. What I would need to do now is basically just simply cut the fill of the parking surface area within the parking edge fill. We can take a look in the 3D, and here you can see that the parking edge is following all ridge lines. However, it's overlapping also the parking surface because we have included that in the calculation. So what I need to do is basically just select the fill representing the parking edge and go to the fill tool and activate the tool. And here, using the magic wand, I will basically clip out by holding space. You can see the the ridge line representing the surface gets highlighted. So if I click on it now, it will be basically cut at that specific ridge line. Now my new surface is including only the spot levels and the ridge lines. I want to have them defined. I also have the level lines active, and I don't want my level lines for this surface, so I'll just uncheck them. But what I want to is to have a surface material, and I'll place some concrete, and I will give it some thickness to 30 centimeters. And now we can check it in the 3D view. And here we can see now that our surface is following and meeting the parking surface. I can also hide the existing terrain so I can have a better overview of my construction site. And close to the road, we can see that the parking edge is basically meeting the parking surface in level. While all around, we have a 10 centimeters in difference. And also we have 1 centimeter between the inside of the parking edge and the outside. Later on, we will continue the work with constructing the pavement. And when we're going to construct the pavement area, we're going to include also the outside of the parking edge. So now I have my corners defined at the edge. Therefore, I can start constructing the spot levels for the pavement. So I can start with this spot level, for instance, here. And once again, I will use gradient interpolation. And here I would like to have a fall instead of a raise. So I will use maybe 2.5% fall and simply snap a spot level on the pavement. I'm not in the right category, so I will place this one in the pavement, and I'll make sure I work in the pavement category from now on. I will do the same with each corner of the pavement border. And I will also use the gravity to place a spot level at the intersection with the road. Now I can start constructing my pavement outer boundary. So I again selected and create it as a ridgeline. And start snapping all the spot levels I have just interpolated. And I can now visualize it in the 3D view. And having my outer boundary, I can now start constructing the pavement area. Before I do that, I can actually use more spot levels for the pavement area. So just to exemplify, I will maybe interpolate more points from the parking edge using a simple 2-point interpolation. And I will add another spot level, maybe here in the middle, pavement, and I can do the same on the other side. Now having this spot level here, I can interpolate another one on the ridge line representing the pavement, and I can do the same in the other side. So you can always add new spot levels. So now I just placed 2 more spot levels, so I want to add them to the ridge line. So I need to select the ridge line and the spot levels. And now I can use the function called add spot level to a ridge line. And I can see 2 more spot levels have been added. Now I will have basically more spot levels, which can be used to construct the pavement area. Now I'm ready, so I will just create the surface here. And you can see the selection again is done automatically. and I just need to press on the function button, and I have my parking edge defined. As you can see here, the surface isn't meeting exactly the road, and that is because I haven't used a spot level for this corner here. So I just wanted to show you how important it is to have spot levels in some specific situations. So I can delete this again, and I want to use these two ones in my pavement category. So I'll use copy to category to pavement, and now the spot levels are copied. Using tab, I can basically jump from one to another, and if I move, for instance, the text for one of them, we can see that it has the same color. So we have the spot levels now present there. We can do again the surface, and now also the spot levels in this corner are selected. If I now press on the green mark, we can see that the fill is been created to that specific point also. Once I have my pavement surface, I can go in the settings, and I can already place some surface material for it and give it a thickness. In the 3D, we can now see the result. When creating the pavement surface, I haven't used the ridge line from the pavement edge, from the outer boundary, which I can select. So this ridge line hasn't been included in the parking, in the pavement surface. Therefore, the surface has been created using all spot levels all around. I can show this by just checking the triangulation in the 2D, and here we can see basically how the spot levels have been used into creating the surface. So because we didn't have a ridge line or a break line representing the border of the inside of the pavement, we basically have no control over the height in here. We can also visualize this in the 3D where these two surfaces are meeting. Therefore, the pavement surface meets the parking edge at that certain level because of the spot levels all around the parking edge, and not because we have or had control over it. But now I can copy to category, and then I can use it in creating the surface where I will have total control over my ridge line there. Now creating the surface, it's also selected, as you can see. Back to 3D, we can now see the surface has updated, and it follows precisely the ridge line we have just included in the pavement surface. Now, this ridge line is basically in both categories, but more important, we have control over the ridge line in the pavement category, and we can basically use the level, or we can control it at a certain level where it should meet the parking edge. This is very useful in situations where we have two neighboring surfaces and we would like to have control on where they meet each other. In this video, we have constructed a site, a parking lot, using Land4 tools. In the next video, we will adapt the new terrain based on our construction, and we will calculate the volumetrics in between the new and the existing terrain. Thank you for watching, and for more videos, visit our YouTube channel or land4cad.com.